Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. We're back with another Big East team preview here. The Providence Friars, who look a little bit different this year, lost a few guards, and Bryce Hopkins, who feels like he's been at Providence for 5 or 6 years, left for St. John's in the league. So a little bit of a different looking team. Before we dive into it, if you are liking the content that we've been putting out, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We really appreciate all the support you guys have given us thus far. But diving in to Providence this year, third year under Kim English. Offensively, what do we see in this team?
Yeah, I mean, from a strength perspective, I think it's a more talented perimeter group, and I think that all starts with the star power of Jason Edwards, who was great at Vanderbilt last year. He averaged 17 points a game and 25.2 minutes a game, which is, obviously great production on a per minute basis. And in Mark Byington's fast-paced offense, he's a talented on and off ball perimeter scorer that I think he's proven throughout his career that he can seamlessly fit into many different offensive schemes. He was at North Texas prior to or after his JUCO year. Then he ended up at Vanderbilt. Now he's here at Providence. I think he's gonna fit in rather smoothly because he's proven that. And I think you have a guy like Jalen Sellers coming from UCF, who is a solid secondary scorer to have by his side. He's got pretty good straight line bursts with. I think he's got a pretty high level ability to score at the rim for his size. I think he's listed at 6'4", 6'5", but he's a really good athlete who is tough to contain off the bounce, and he can knock it down from three at a competent clip. And then the man who's probably going to be operating as the point guard or primary ball handler, at least, is Daquan Davis, is a 4-star coming from Florida State who could potentially have a year 2 leap after a rather poor year 1 at Florida State. I have some concerns with his game efficiency wise, and I don't really think he was ready for the usage that he received or the time that he received in year 1 at Florida State. But he was a 4-star guy. He certainly has on-ball talent. We just need to see him put it together. And then, on the wings, you have some proven depth pieces in Corey Floyd, Duncan Powell, and Rich Barron to kind of round out the perimeter group. They're solid off-ball shooting options, and I think Floyd can provide some ball handling depth. So I liked a guy like Bensley Joseph last year, but I think the group as a whole this year, I think, looks a lot more well-rounded. I think there's more talent across the board. I think Jason Edwards is 100% an upgrade over a guy like Joseph or Jaden Pierre, who ended up at TCU. I think he's just going to give you a higher perimeter shot-making floor at the least. I think they kind of struggled in that area, and I think they have more straight-line bursts than they've had in the past, or at least from last year.
Yeah, no mention of your boy Ryan Mila there.
Yeah, he's going to slot into the starting lineup like a two-way piece. He's not going to bring you any crazy on-ball talent, but I think he's rock solid as a two-way piece with connector guy.
They need him to probably shoot the ball a bit better. But I think you're right with the guards. I think Jason Edwards, as we saw last year, being kind of a smaller guard at 6 feet tall, you worry as he goes to the SEC of like, okay, what's his game going to look like in the SEC? And while he doesn't provide a ton of creation for others in the offense, he does know how to get his own shot, and he averaged 17-ish a game at Vanderbilt. So he's scored everywhere he's been, and I think that's going to be a huge key for this Providence offense, having a perimeter guy that can go get you a bucket and knock down tough shots. And then, to your point about Sellers, we didn't see a lot of him last year, only played 4 games. But he's been a solid piece for a few years. And then a guy, honestly, that I think is maybe a little bit underrated and could be very important for this offense is Duncan Powell. I think we saw last year in spurts his offensive game, he would kind of go on mini runs by himself. I think there was one game in the ACC tournament where he started the game kind of red hot, and they were just playing through him sort of in that like 15, 16-foot range, but he also has the ability to step outside. I think like standing at 6'8", he has, the ability to play in and out, which will, I think, really help this offense, right? Last year playing with three bigs that you didn't really have a ton of faith to go to on the offensive end. Um, mostly as just like lob threats or offensive rebound guys last year. You saw Essendoko and Bonk both leave. Um, obviously, he's not the size of those guys at 6'8", but I think he provides some offensive punch that they didn't have before, to kind of complement that perimeter group in Sellers and Edwards, and like you said, Davis, and then some other pieces around them. I think it's a much better Providence team this year compared to last year.
Yeah, I think those guys like Mila and Duncan Powell, I think they bring a different element to the four position that they haven't really had in the past. It's been a little bit less floor spacing. I know we haven't seen a ton of Bryce Hopkins the last couple of years, but I think he would have been like obviously the final piece to the puzzle, and he could have allowed this offense to gain some traction and potentially be in the bubble conversation. But I think you made a good point. Like I think Duncan Powell is at the very least going to be a good off-ball shooter for this team, and he has shown the ability to create some of his own offense and go on some mini runs by himself. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's some added talent on this roster. I don't think it's it's not an offense that's going to overwhelm you by any means, but I do think there's more upside. Plus, I think the star power of Jason Edwards is going to bring you like a slightly higher floor, at least.
Yeah. Another strength, I think, before we dive into weaknesses, and I'm not going to try and butcher his name, but Oswin, however you
it's
say
a tough one. It's a tough one.
But
I don't even know if I'm going to attempt it either. But maybe.
But he was a freshman last year. I believe he was a 4-star, 6'10", long. He really struggled last year, like staying on the floor, if I remember right. He was a big foul trouble guy. Just kind of out of control. But when he's on the floor, he's a 14.3% offensive rebound rate guy. He's a big-time lob threat. He's not a guy that they're necessarily going to play through, but I think he has the ability to impact the game on the offensive end just by being like a pick-and-roll lob threat and on the offensive glass, right? Because it's now like he's kind of their size, right? Like after Duncan Powell, they have him and Cole Hargrove, who also transferred in. And he's standing at 6'10". He's their only true like center, I would say. So I think he can provide some punch there as a pretty athletic guy who can also run the floor in transition and potentially beat other 5 men down the floor.
Yeah, I think especially he's going to be a talented lob threat in pick and roll. And he has the guards to pair with that at the very least. So I do think he's going to get more time this season. There were times where he was stuck behind Essendoko and Bonk, but as the year went on, he played more minutes. He finished the year at 20 minutes per game, and I would expect him to at least get to 25 if he can stay on the floor for longer spurts. And growing on the offensive side is really going to help him out.
Yeah, I mean, averaging 6 fouls per 40 certainly doesn't help. So that's going to be up to him and like his defensive discipline. But offensive weaknesses, you mentioned Daquan Davis, going to run the show probably at the point guard. They've got Jason Edwards and Sellers. None of those guys really, I mean, Davis a little bit, like 17% assist rate, but Sellers and Edwards both are not really creators for others, right? Edwards last year, 11% assist rate. Sellers 12.5, but he had a 33.7% turnover rate. So this is an area I certainly worry about with this team. It's like, how are they going to create offense for others, right? I have no question about like whether Jason Edwards can get into the lane and create his own opportunities for himself, right? But is he going to be able to take that next step, now at Providence where, that there is a little bit of talent around him, and can he create shot opportunities for others?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to come down to these guys kind of just playing off of each other and helping each other out. I think it's going to be a heavy drive and kick offense. I think we're going to see we're going to see a lot of continuity, pick and roll as well. I think that's how these guys are going to free themselves up, particularly Edwards and Daquan Davis. And Sellers on the wing obviously is a really good fit for a drive and kick offense. And Kim English offenses are typically rim and three driven. They don't really like to live in the mid range at all. But there's just not, like, looking at this roster, I don't think there's like high enough level rim scorers, particularly on the perimeter. And then can the floor spacing like offset that to really open up more rim opportunities? I'm not so sure that this is like a high level perimeter shooting team. But one issue that I really have is, can Kim English like truly elevate an offense? His best finish in adjusted offense as a head coach per Torvik is 98th in the nation. And that's in a 4-year sample, 1 year at George Mason, then 3 years at Providence. And he's had a roster with Devin Carter, who was a lottery pick, Bryce Hopkins. He only played 33% of the minutes due to a torn ACL that year. And he had Josh Aduro, who he brought with from George Mason. And that offense still didn't even crack the top 100. That was in 23-24. So if you have an offense with that much talent, I kind of have concerns of him being able to elevate it. Like I mentioned, like, his offenses are rim and three heavy, but I think how they generate these looks is a little bit lacking, like you mentioned, with the lack of passing ability, and some of these guys have some turnover issues in their past. So I do have those are my main concerns, and I don't know if they're going to be able to win the extras all that much, like you mentioned, with the turnovers. And I don't think they're going to be unbelievable on the offensive glass. I know Oswin was good. He had a 14.3% offensive rebound rate, but the guys behind him from a depth perspective are a little bit lacking on the offensive glass. I know Hargrove was solid. I think he was 11.2% last season, but at just 6'8", I think there are questions as to how well that translates to the Big East level.
Yeah, no, I think it's certainly valid. I think, like, you worry about a team like this becoming too perimeter oriented with a group, like you said, that it's not like they're going to light the world on fire from behind the arc. Like, they're a decent shooting team, but certainly not, the Golden State Warriors of 2016. So I think it's a valid concern, especially with, the lack of interior scoring, right? It's not like you have a guy you can throw it to on the low post, like, a Bryce Hopkins, that can just get you a bucket there. And so, if these guards if their shot diet's not great, it's a little bit of a concern, because you really are going to rely on like one guy potentially to get you offensive rebounds and second chances. So that definitely is a concern, I think, just the offense becoming too perimeter oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point about not really having a guy that you can give it to on the low block to kind of open up these the rest of this perimeter offense. Like, we know Jason Edwards is great, but we do have concerns about how, like, guys like Sellers and Davis are going to be able to create for others. So it could just create for more of an average Big East offense at the end of the day. I think they have good players. I just don't know how they generate great looks consistently.
Yeah. On the defensive side, how are we feeling about Providence?
I think I feel much better than how last season shaped up. They finished 139th in adjusted defensive efficiency, and getting guys like Essendoko and Bonk out the door, I think to throw in more minutes for Oswin, I think is going to be very beneficial for this defense, because we know, I think Oswin's going to provide some value in the dunker spot and as a role man, but he's a defense first guy at the end of the day. And he had an 8.7% block rate last season, and I think he definitely plays more than 50% of the team's minutes if he can stay out of foul trouble. The on-off numbers for Oswin were were pretty stark on the defensive side. In conference play, they had Providence had a 108.4 defensive rating, which was 50th percentile, like not fantastic. But when he was off the floor, Providence had a 124.2 defensive rating in 344 conference minutes. That's a first percentile rating. So it just goes to show how much he impacted the game while he was in the game. Like and Kim English defenses are, they're heavy drop coverage defenses trying to cut off, catch and shoot threes, filtering actions into the mid range and into the paint, and filtering it into your best shot blocker is a pretty good proposition. So, and those numbers obviously show the kind of impact that he can have. And I think the wing options on this team as well, I think they match the drop coverage scheme that emphasizes on-ball defense in space. Like a guy like Jalen Sellers is a solid switchable wing at 6'5". Ryan Mila can play the 3 or 4 at 6'6". And this is where the freshmen come into play, the 4-star freshmen, Jameer Jones and Jalen Harrell. They're very athletic and interchangeable wings. I don't really know where their offensive games are at. They don't really space the floor all that well, and they have some concerns like handling the ball in a half-court setting. So I'm not sure how often they play. It's probably more spot minutes, but while they're in the game, they're going to be real impacts on the defensive end. So I'm a lot more excited about this team on the defensive end than I am offensively. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think they actually improved on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oswin is going to be kind of their anchor. He's going to have to be, right? We touched on the depth concerns in the front court. Like we said, Bonk left, Essendoko left. Well, I think those are good things because it means more minutes for Oswin. I think he really can impact shots, but then if you look back to his tape really before he got to Providence last year, I think his mobility can come into play a little bit defensively as well, because he does move well. He's long. I think it doesn't necessarily I know drop coverage tends to be the play, but I don't know as if it always needs to be, because I do think he offers some ability to guard things a little bit differently, right? It's not like you have Essendoko or Bonk who don't move overly well, that are going to be coming up to like hedge a ball screen or hedge a handoff. So I think there's some optionality for Kim English here. And like you said, with some wing options that have switchability as well, some guards that, some of them maybe aren't the best defenders, but they are capable of making plays. Like Jason Edwards is, a solid defender at 6 feet, makes plays, had over a 2% steal rate. So I think that there's just a lot more optionality in this defense now where they can guard things differently. They have length, and they have, Oswin kind of at the back end to alter shots, but also, to hopefully allow them to do some different things.
Yeah. I would be hopeful that they're going to do different things. I don't think Kim English has ever been like willing to change his defensive scheme. And to be fair, he's always had pretty good defenses. Last year obviously wasn't a great fit, like especially with Essendoko. He was just very, very limited as a defender. Like you can really only play him in drop, and he wasn't really a great defender or a great rim protector in that area. So, but yeah, I definitely understand your point, and they have a ton of athletes. And when you have a ton of athletes and good defenders, you can do a lot of different things. It's just not sure if English is willing to completely change, but at the end of the day, I still think it's a good defense.
Yeah. In terms of weaknesses, I mean, I know for me, I do worry a little bit about them on the defensive glass. I think like Oswin is kind of going to have to be a vacuum on the defensive glass. You've got Duncan Powell and Hargrove, who are solid solid defensive rebounders. Powell was like 14%. Hargrove was right around 15. I don't think it's like going to be an overly I think they'll be okay here, but I think it is a weakness of this defense because I don't see them wowing on the defensive glass. I think they're really going to need Oswin to step up, and some of those wing guys to also be impactful. Guys like Mila, Corey Floyd, right? Powell's going to have to be big on the glass, I think, as well. So, and even a guy like Sellers at 6'5", like they list him, like he needs to help out on the glass for a team that doesn't have a ton of depth in the front court after Oswin.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the scheme will help mask this to an extent. I mean, Kim English has typically had pretty good defensive rebounding teams, and when you're in more of a drop scheme, I think your defenders are in better positions to box out and get rebounds. And I think Mila's a good defensive rebounder. I'm not sure if Hargrove and Osman can play side by side, just because I think they're more true fives, even though Hargrove's 6'8", he plays a little bit bigger. But yeah, I definitely understand your point there, and they're not getting any help from the guard spot. And I think that's kind of where my biggest concern is, the Edwards Davis backcourt duo might be a weak point here. I just think they're too small, and the fact that they're going to be seeing the bulk of the minutes together, I think could potentially break down this defense at times when opposing guards are able to get to the lane and force shrink threes. I think that's a very poor sign for a Kim English defense that tries to limit those open catch and shoot threes as often as possible. So Edwards and Davis are going to have to step up defensively and be a little bit better than they've been in the past in order for Kim English to uphold his style.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think my main concern was with Jason Edwards in the backcourt defensively, but Davis too. Like, it's a valid point. I do worry about the backcourt, and hopefully, like if they do struggle, hopefully Oswin can be disciplined and be on the floor more and eat up rim attempts. But we have 1 year to go off of, and so that is a concern for me too. Is like his discipline. Can he stay on the floor? 6 fouls per 40 last year, and really no true size behind him, right? They'd have to play small with, like Hargrove or Powell at the 5, both 6'8". So the front court depth, I think, is an issue as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. That was the other issue I had marked down. It's going to come down to if Hargrove can play a role at the Big East level. I mean, he averaged 1.8 blocks per game at 6'8" in the CAA, which isn't a bad league by any means. I'm not going to slander the CAA, but I do think there are some concerns with an undersized 5-man stepping up to the Big East. I mean, there's not much depth besides that, but I do think the wing depth can help mask it if they want to play a little small ball and kind of just switch everything. I think that's an area that they could go, and an area that Kim English did have to go last year when he had some front court pieces injured and kind of just wanted to switch up what he was doing from a defensive standpoint, because there weren't many things that went well on the side of the ball last year.
Yeah. And before we wrap things up, let's get an MVP, X factor, ceiling, floor of this team, and then a bold prediction.
Yeah, for my MVP, I went Jason Edwards. I think, he averaged 17 points a game in 25 minutes. I know it's a fast-paced Mark Byington style, but I do think he's going to end up playing 30-plus within this offense. There's not as much depth as that Vanderbilt team had last year, so I do think getting close to 20 points per game is in the realm of possibility for Edwards. And for X Factor, I went with Oswin. I just think his defensive impact is going to be too large. It's just going to be a matter of, can he stay on the floor for more than 20 minutes? If he can play 25 to 27 minutes, I think his impact is going to be large enough to make this team, at the very least, middle of the pack in the Big East, if not in the conversation to finish in the top 4. So I think he's probably the most important player and the biggest swing player on this roster. And for my ceiling floor, I said they could be a first weekend tourney team at their ceiling, or in 3rd or 4th in the Big East. I just think after the first 2 teams in this Big East, with UConn and St. John's, I think there's a real opportunity for a team to finish 3rd. I don't think Creighton is as strong as they've been in the past, and there's a lot of teams in this league that have a lot of concerns, and I think Providence has their share, but I think they might have a high enough floor to get themselves into the conversation to finish 3rd and may potentially even finish above Creighton. At their floor, I think eighth in the Big East is probably where their floor is at. I think their defense is going to be good enough to keep them out of the cellar, and I think not making a tournament is also where their floor is at. And my bold prediction, I said Oswin is 100% going to be in the running for Big East Defensive Player of the Year. I know this award was kind of set aside for Ryan Kalkbrenner at the end of the season at Creighton, but I think there's real opportunity now with him out the door, and Creighton didn't really bring in that main rim protector and that drop scheme that McDermott filters everything into. So I think there's a real opportunity for Oswin to win Big East Defensive Player of the Year. I know there's some other candidates at other places, like Marquette comes to mind, with a guy like Chase Ross. But I think as the true rim anchor that Oswin is, with more playing time, I think there's a real opportunity that he can walk away with this.
Yeah, I like that take. He's a guy, when we put out our breakout players, he's a guy I have my eye on as a guy that could really break out this year. Now for MVP and X Factor, I went the same direction. Jason Edwards, Oswin. I think you make a great point. Like, he's as important, I think, as any player in the Big East to the success of his team. With the lack of front court depth and what they're going to need him to do on the defensive end as a rim protector and defensive rebounder, I think he's going to be very important. So it's imperative he stays on the floor. For me, same thing kind of as well. Ceiling, I had as fourth in the Big East. It's no secret that this league is a little bit weaker outside of UConn and St. John's at the top. So I think there's an avenue maybe for third, like you said, and then I had them, seventh or eighth at the floor. I don't think they're bad enough. I think there's enough talent. I think Jason Edwards is good enough to kind of keep them, above sea level. My bold prediction, though, was Providence averages the fewest assists per game of any team in the Power Five. Just I don't know. Well, it's supposed to be bold, right? And I think that is an area, like we discussed, that they are lacking a little bit of creation. So just going to go out on a limb and say they struggle to share the ball. Maybe they'll be good in isolation. Jason Edwards can create his own for sure. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were 198th in the country in assist rate last year, and so I do think there's a little bit less playmaking on this year's roster. They had guys like Bensley Joseph and who had a 22.3% assist rate, Pierre 18.3, Hopkins was 21.7 when he was on the floor. I don't really think they have a high usage guy that's willing to facilitate at a high rate. So I think it's possible. I think they're pretty close to bottom five in this category for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps things up. We'll see what the Providence men's basketball team has in store for us at the Amica Mutual Pavilion this year.